Welcome to the Global News Podcast from the BBC. I'm Valerie Sanderson and I'm joined by Luis Fajardo. Luis, Venezuela has declared a state of emergency because of the earthquakes that have happened in the country. What can you tell us?
The images and the news we're getting from Venezuela are truly heartbreaking. The amount of destruction that the country has suffered, and it is going to have to deal with a huge task of reconstruction from what the first images we're getting. We see images in Caracas, in the Venezuelan capital, of entire rows of high-rise buildings very seriously damaged, in some cases even flattened, basically. Also images in other areas of the Caracas metropolitan area, people in their neighborhoods seeing their houses or the houses of their neighbors destroyed. The authorities are saying that one of the worst hits, or possibly the worst hit area, is the area around La Guaira. La Guaira is a port relatively close to the capital, to Caracas. It is also very near to where the international airport is, to Maiquetía International Airport, which the airport is serving the nation's capital. It also controls most of the international air traffic of the country. This airport has been very seriously damaged. According to authorities, it has to be closed for a while. And there's concern that other parts of the country are going to also be reporting the serious damages as more information becomes available.
We understand something like a quarter of the population needed urgent aid even before this natural disaster. Explain more about that.
Venezuela is still reeling from the difficulties of many years of economic chaos, you'd have to describe it that way, during the past Maduro administration. During that time, of course, Venezuela suffered all kinds of economic problems. It suffered hyperinflation and also a huge outflow of migrants to other countries in Latin America and to other parts, to the US, to Europe. One of the striking elements of this tragedy is so many Venezuelans abroad, millions of Venezuelans abroad, trying to come to terms with what happened and trying to find out about their loved ones, of course. So yes, Venezuela has been suffering a lot. It had been seen as relatively stabilizing its economy in more recent times, but still a very large part of the population, as you say, suffering a very, very difficult condition, which is surely going to become even more difficult to manage with this major tragedy that has happened in the country.
Well, yes, as you said, very difficult conditions. What does it mean, do you think, for response to the disaster on the ground?
That is going to be clearly a very big challenge for Venezuelan authorities. Also, a tricky political situation that the country is facing, of course, after the January military operation led by the US, in which the former president Nicolás Maduro was removed from power. It is unclear exactly what kind of role the US is going to have in this rescue operation. Of course, President Trump has already said, and other high-ranking US officials have said, that the US is going to offer a lot of support to Venezuela, but it is tricky, again, because of the political circumstance that the country is experiencing. The Trump administration said it had taken the deliberate decision when this January operation took place of leaving a lot of officials and people close to the former administration in place, because they said then in January of this year that if everyone was removed, it would cause chaos, it would cause anarchy. So they needed to keep a lot of the government system in place, the old government system in place. And this has created a very awkward situation in which a lot of people who had a strong allegiance to the Maduro administration, and in fact had been taught to think of the United States as their main enemy, and they had said for many years that the United States was their main enemy. Now these are the people that the US would need to work with, presumably, to try to get all the aid and to try to start the reconstruction process. So it is going to be interesting and challenging, many observers are saying, to see how this actually works out in practice when the US starts to send aid and try to help Venezuela in other ways.
Well, we should say that the US have already said that they're going to have a quick response. I mean, what is mostly needed now?
It is certainly initially, there's, of course, a search and rescue operation going on. Venezuela has said that it has received many offers of aid, not only from the United States, from many other countries in Latin America and even further afield, to try to find, of course, the many people who are still missing, the many people who are still missing. Of course, we don't have a clear idea of the numbers yet, but certainly the first hours, as in most tragedies of this kind, it is going to be a search and rescue operation. But then in the months and even the years after, you're definitely going to have to see a very big influx of capital, of technical know-how, of managerial know-how to try to rebuild the infrastructure, which surely has been very damaged during this tragedy that has happened in Venezuela.
Well, President Trump, he has already promised redevelopment money and reinvestment in the country, hasn't he? I mean, how do you think this disaster might affect that?
Well, clearly, again, Venezuela is going to have more of a challenge in trying to redevelop its economic system with this tragedy. Of course, a lot of the expectations of economic recovery in Venezuela during this very troubled year were centered around the idea of the oil industry returning to its former glory. You know, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves, proven oil reserves in the world, but the oil industry was a shadow of itself in recent years because of all the mismanagement, all the political problems that the country had faced. And there was a lot of hope in the idea that with the new political arrangement, there was going to be a lot of investment into the oil industry, which would have a positive impact for the international economy, of course, but mainly for Venezuelans. The idea that this was going to be the main source of rebuilding their country after all these years of economic unrest and political unrest. Now it's going to be probably harder. Now, it is said that the oil infrastructure, there is not a lot of information of direct hits on the oil infrastructure. Actually, a lot of the oil facilities were in other parts of the country that apparently were not as directly hit by the earthquake. But certainly, I mean, starting from the very basic situation in which a lot of the communications of the country are not working, the international airport seemed very damaged. So, of course, this is going to create additional pressures, additional challenges for Venezuelans who have not had an easy time by any means in the last few years.
You're describing, Luis, a very troubled country. Now we have a natural disaster. As you said, the economy is in dire straits. And there are also calls for free and fair elections. Do you think that's going to be turbocharged by what's happening, that people want to have a say in what happens going forward after this disaster?
Certainly in January, just after the removal of Nicolás Maduro, there was a lot of expectation that a lot of change was going to happen in Venezuela very quickly. The people were seeing the prospect of new elections happening soon, of the release of all political prisoners, of a return to the democratic normality that the country once had. This has not taken place. Of course, the Trump administration has been saying that it has to work very gradually and very carefully to maintain the stability of the system. So it has been frustrating for many Venezuelans, without a doubt, that there have been no direct announcements of imminent presidential elections. And the very fact that the acting president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, who was a very prominent member of the previous government, she's still in charge. The Trump administration has often said that they are working very well with her, that they're very happy with this arrangement. So a lot of Venezuelans were thinking, when is this actually going to happen? When are we going to move to the next stage of the normalization of the country? And certainly with this tragedy, I imagine that many people will be also saying, we need political change in Venezuela, and that is what they have been asking for. And there's certainly going to be pressure on the US government to continue and maybe accelerate this path towards a democratic system in Venezuela.
What about the response on the ground from the Venezuelan authorities themselves to these earthquakes? Is it effective?
Venezuela, as we've been discussing, has had a very troubled last few years. And one of the things that has often been said, even before this tragedy, was the lack of capacity of the Venezuelan state to respond to many needs of the citizenship. After so many years of troubles, a lot of state institutions are seen as not working very well. So there's a lot of anxiety about how effective the immediate response is going to be undertaken by the Venezuelan government. Certainly a lot of difficulties. Again, communications are very badly affected. Even before this, Venezuela was a country that faced very frequent power outages, things like that. And I imagine with the hit of the earthquake, it's going to be even more challenging. So a lot of doubts of how the Venezuelan government and state authorities are going to respond to this tragedy. They certainly, again, are asking for international help. A lot of countries are offering it, and they most likely will be needing a lot of it in the next few weeks and even months.
Thanks, Luis. That was Luis Fajardo there. If you want to hear more on this story, just listen to our Global News podcast. Click on the link below. But that's it from this edition of the Global News podcast here on YouTube. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And bye for now.